Hi, I am Reverend Nora Foust, one of the Penn Central Conference's Associate Conference Ministers, and this is Morsels of Excellence. This year's vlog has the theme of being a healthy church. We've been looking at the marks of a healthy church. Dictionary.com tells us that a mark is something visible or like a badge, an impression that you leave on others. Last month, we looked at the mark of spiritual foundation and practice within your congregation, you individually and collectively as a community. This month, we're going to dig a little bit deeper in ways that your congregation engages our sacred stories and traditions. When I was a little girl, every single Bible story had a felt board reenactment. I can still see Jesus at the well with the woman. I can still see Moses holding up the 10 Commandments. As I grew older, the tree-shaped felt board was put away in the closet, and Reader's Theater, or even a fellowship hall stage dramatization, might take over for the retelling of these Bible stories. Our Christmas pageant always included shepherds dressed in stripes and wise men in solid satin. We gathered twice a year in the brick gazebo in the middle of our cemetery to hear words of resurrection at 6:30-ish on Easter Sunday morning, and around 12:15 just after worship to hear words of remembrance on homecoming. Kids were confirmed in middle school. Communion was in the pews with little plastic cups. The hallway smelled of sulfur where the choir director lit the acolyte tapers. A friend of mine was baptized in the river at our summer camp as a number of us stood along the bank. I baptized her twin daughters with holy tap water just a few years later. I could go on with these memories for the entirety of our time together, but I hope that I have achieved my goal of getting you to think about the stories and traditions of your church, to think about ways that scriptural stories are shared and passed on, how sacred traditions like weddings, funerals, church practices like cantatas or VBS, sacraments like communion and baptism, how are these the same and how have they changed over time? Why do you do them the way that you do? Who's in charge of picking the VBS material? And will the kids sing to MP4s, live guitar, or cassette tapes? What do you say to visitors on Communion Sundays? How do they know what to do, the holy dance that is your celebration of the Eucharist? When was the last time you had church-wide or small group discussions about what's happening when you participate in this sacrament? Is pew communion different from intinction? Who can take communion and why? Or what about the ways that your faith formation teachers teach? Or the way that your pastor preaches and prepares for worship? Do you still have felt boards for sharing Bible stories? Is Reader's Theater a common practice? What about different ways of engagement for different generations or people with different abilities? When was the last time a group sat down in your church to share personal stories, testimonies of what living in covenant with God looks and feels like today? When studying scripture, do you connect your own sacred stories with those in the text? Do you know Jonah's vine and worm? What about Amos's plumb line? The story of Lydia or Esther? How about the ways that you personally or congregationally seek intersections of your story with these? Does your church look at Christian history over time or just in our own time? How much has your church changed from when it was founded to today, whether you are 250 years old or 25 years old. What's changed about the ways that you worship or participate in the sacraments, the programming of your church? Different generations cry out for different ways to connect to the holy. How does your sacred space allow for that? The biblical narrative does, in fact, stay the same. The stories we share, the ways we connect, the ways that we interpret these stories, they speak life into our living today. The sacraments of communion and baptism, along with other rites of the church, like marriage, funerals, confirmations, even ordinations, are meant to be talked about, discussed, engaged for deep meaning in every generation. Strive to understand the why for the way things are, the way you do things, when and why things might need to change. Healthy churches share stories and traditions and move forward together into God's calling, knowing exactly why they tell each story, why they do it this way, why they're changing it to that way. Thanks so much for joining me this month for our morsel. Remember, conference staff is here to help your congregation be as healthy as you can be. Reach out and ask us for help. And be sure to come back next month when I will talk about leadership as a mark in the church today. Take care, friends, and be blessed.